My grandmother left me her house the way some people leave debts, with unspoken obligations and the weight of things I didn't understand. I'd never been inside. Gran had kept it locked up tight for 40 years, living in a cramped apartment in the city while this Victorian monstrosity sat empty in the hills, gathering dust and property taxes. The lawyer handed me the keys with an expression that suggested condolences rather than congratulations. "Your grandmother left specific instructions," he said, sliding a sealed envelope across his desk. "You're to read this before entering." The letter, in Gran's spidery handwriting, said only, "Don't touch anything with your bare hands. Not at first. You'll understand why." I understood nothing, but I drove out there anyway because I needed to sell it, and you can't sell a house you've never seen. The place looked like it had grown from the hillside rather than been built upon it. All dark wood and narrow windows that watched the driveway like suspicious eyes. The key turned in the lock with a sound like breaking bone, and the door exhaled 40 years of trapped air into my face. It smelled like roses and smoke and something underneath that made my hindbrain scream wrong, wrong, wrong. I'd brought work gloves. Gran's warning had seemed crazy, but crazy ran in our family like a recessive gene, and I'd learned to respect it. The interior was a museum of ordinary life frozen mid-moment. Teacups on the kitchen table, a book spine up on the reading chair, shoes by the door, laces still tied, as if someone had stepped out of them mid-stride and simply evaporated. I picked up the teacup. Floral pattern, chipped rim, the kind of thing you'd find at any estate sale. And the drowning hit me. Not the thought of drowning, not the fear of it. The actual sensation of water flooding my lungs, the burn of chlorine and the terrible pressure of liquid where air should be. I was choking, dying, my body thrashing in a bathtub that wasn't there while my mind screamed that this wasn't my death. Couldn't be my death because I was standing in a kitchen holding a stupid teacup. I dropped it. The porcelain shattered across the linoleum and the drowning vanished like a popped soap bubble. My hands were shaking inside the work gloves. My throat felt raw, though I'd never stopped breathing. The fragments of teacup lay scattered at my feet, and I understood with horrible clarity that I was looking at a murder weapon, or a murder victim, or both. Gran's house was full of them. I found the hairbrush on the bedroom vanity, and even through the globes, I could feel it humming with trapped sensation. I knew that touching it would bring fire. The smell of smoke was already leaking from it like perfume, and I could hear, very faintly, the sound of screaming. The book contained the last thoughts of someone falling. The shoes held the memory of running, of being chased, of the moment the ankle twisted, and the pursuer's footsteps grew closer, close enough to... I stopped touching things. Instead, I walked through the house like an archaeologist in a tomb, cataloging the objects that lined every surface. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, each one a perfectly preserved moment of someone's violent ending. The house was a collection, I realized, a gallery of deaths. And Gran had been the curator. I found her journals in the basement, stacked in boxes that practically vibrated with importance. 40 years of careful documentation. Names, dates, objects, causes of death. She'd started small. A necklace from a car accident victim purchased at an estate sale. When she touched it, she felt the impact, the gloss, the moment life became something else. Most people would have thrown it away, burned it, tried to forget. Gran had bought more. The objects are hungry. She'd written an entry dated 1983. They want to be held. They want their moments witnessed. If no one touches them, they find ways to be touched. I read that passage 3 times, standing in the basement where the light hung in dusty shafts like prison bars. Above me, the house creaked and settled, and I heard something that might have been wind, or might have been the collective sigh of 100 trapped deaths breathing in unison. That's when I realized the objects weren't just in the house. They were the house. Every piece of furniture, every doorknob, every floorboard, all of it had been collected, installed, assembled from the detritus of violent endings. Gran had built a home from murder, and now it was mine. I felt it then, that subtle pull. The teacup fragments on the kitchen floor were calling to me, whispering that if I just touched them one more time, I could understand. The hairbrush wanted to share its fire. The shoes were eager to show me their chase. They wanted a new curator. Someone to witness them, to hold them, to keep their deaths alive through eternal re-experiencing. My hand moved toward my pocket, toward the keys. I could leave, drive away. Let the bank foreclose, let the house collapse into the hillside, let the dead stay dead. But Gran's final journal entry stopped me cold. I'm dying and the collection is incomplete. It needs one more piece, mine. I've left everything ready. The bathtub is clean. The water is measured. When you find this, I'll already be part of the house. Touch the faucet handles, dear. Feel what I felt. Know what I knew. And then decide if you'll finish what I started. I stood in the basement, surrounded by boxes of carefully documented deaths, and I understood. This was the inheritance. Not the house, not the objects, but the choice. The faucet handles upstairs were brass, polished to a warm glow. Even from the basement, I could feel them waiting. And God help me, I wanted to know. I wanted to touch them. I wanted to feel what Gran had felt as the water rose and her lungs burned and her collection finally included her. My foot found the first stair, then the second. The house hummed around me like a pleased cat, and every object in every room whispered the same invitation. Touch us, know us, join us. The gloves came off easier than I expected. Dr. Gail Chun first noticed it on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after patient 0 arrived. She was reviewing charts in the nurse's station when the fluorescent lights above her began to hum. That industrial drone that lived in every hospital corridor like a resident ghost. But this time, the sound carried with it the unmistakable tang of copper pennies spreading across her tongue. Bright and metallic, undeniable, Gail looked up. The lights buzzed on, innocent as always, while her mouth flooded with the taste of old coins and something darker underneath. Blood, maybe? Or the memory of blood. She swallowed. The taste remained. You feel that, doctor? Nurse Mitchell stood frozen by the medication cart, her face gone the color of hospital linens. Feel what? The lights. They taste like licking a battery. The sensation faded after a moment, retreating like a tide, but it left something behind. A residue of wrongness that clung to the back of Sarah's throat. She made a note in her phone. The third incident this week, the 11th since patient 0's admission. They called him 0 because nobody knew his name. The ambulance had found him seizing in an alley behind a shuttered neurochemical plant. His ID dissolved by rain or time or something else entirely. His synesthesia was unlike anything in the literature. When he looked at the color red, he claimed he could feel gravity reversing. The sound of running water made him see geometric shapes that hurt to perceive. Touch evoked impossible temperatures. Ice that burned, fire that froze. The contamination, because that's what Gail had begun calling it in her private thoughts, the ones she didn't share with hospital administration, had started small, contained. Dr. Reeves, 0's primary neurologist, had been the first. He'd mentioned that examining the patient made his fingertips feel like they were remembering frostbite. Not experiencing it, he'd insisted. Remembering it, as though his flesh contained the ghost of damage that had never occurred, then others. A respiratory therapist who swore the color of 0's hospital gown evoked the sensation of silk, though the gown was cotton. An orderly who claimed that standing in 0's room made him hear whispers in the wall outlets, speaking in the cadence of his dead mother's voice. The hospital had quarantined the ward. Standard procedure for unexplained neurological symptoms, they said, though Gail had seen the fear swimming behind the chief of medicine's eyes. This wasn't standard. This was something that crept and spread and rewired the basic architecture of perception itself. Now, 6 days into quarantine, the 4th floor had become a place where the rules of sense had grown fluid and strange, where reality evoked the wrong responses, like a poem translated through too many languages until only the shape of meaning remained. Gail walked the corridor, her footsteps echoing in rhythms that seemed to suggest words she couldn't quite hear. The afternoon light through the windows felt wrong. Not dim or bright, but somehow heavy, as if illumination had acquired weight and texture. It pressed against her skin like velvet soaked in formaldehyde. Room 447, patient 0 lay in his bed, eyes open but unseeing, lost in whatever sensory hellscape his rewired brain had constructed. His monitors beeped steadily, that metronome of continued life, but Gail had begun to notice that the beeps carried with them a faint smell of ozone and burnt sugar. She was smelling sounds now. Christ. "We need to evacuate," Mitchell said from the doorway. Her voice sounded purple. No, that was insane. Voices didn't have colors. Except Gail could see it, a violet shimmer in the air where the words had been, hanging like smoke. They won't authorize it. Not without understanding the mechanism. Sarah's own voice rippled outward in waves of amber and rust, but there was no mechanism to understand. This wasn't a virus or bacteria, nothing that could be cultured or isolated or killed. It was something else, a breaking down of the walls between senses, between perception and reality itself. 0 had brought it with him from that plant, from whatever had been manufactured there in the dark. And now it was teaching their brains a new language, one where sensory meaning had become unmoored from its anchors. The lights above them hummed their copper song. Gail looked at Mitchell and saw her fear evoke the texture of sandpaper, rough and abrading. She looked at 0 and felt his breathing resonate in her molars, each exhalation a small earthquake in her jaw. Through the window, she could see the city beyond the hospital, still normal, still whole, still operating under the old rules where light was only light and sound was only sound. But the contamination was patient. It had already spread to the 3rd floor. Yesterday, a lab technician had reported that the color white evoked the sensation of falling. This morning, someone in radiology claimed they could taste the X-ray machine's electromagnetic field. The hospital was becoming a place where reality evoked only wrongness. And the wrongness was learning to evoke itself, spreading outward in ripples, teaching the world a new and terrible way to perceive. Gail's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and heard the text message arrive as the smell of lilacs and formaldehyde. It was starting. The house chose its angles before Magdalene even walked through the door. She'd seen it 1,000 times on the Location Scout's Instagram. Every corner bathed in that golden hour glow that made reality look like a fever dream of better living. Marble countertops that caught light like altar stones. Windows that framed the canyon view in perfect thirds, as if the landscape itself understood composition. Even the shadows fell in aesthetically pleasing gradients, dark to light, like a preset filter made architectural. It's algorithmic design, the property manager had explained during the virtual tour, her voice honeyed with Silicon Valley confidence. Built using aggregated data from the top 10,000 lifestyle posts. Every surface, every sightline, engineered for maximum emotional response and engagement. Magdalene had signed the 6-month lease that afternoon. So had the others, Ethan with his cooking content, Jade doing wellness and meditation, Marcus shooting daily vlogs, Priya's fashion reels, and Casey's comedy sketches. 6 creators, 1 house. Infinite content opportunities. The first week felt like living inside a curated dream. Magdalene couldn't take a bad photo. The morning light through the kitchen windows hit her coffee cup at precisely the angle that evoked warmth, comfort, home. Even though she'd never lived anywhere like this. The bedroom made her feel mysteriously melancholic in a way that translated beautifully on camera, her followers commenting that she seemed more real than ever. The living room's architectural lines pulled nostalgia from some unnamed source, a longing for a past she'd never experienced. Her engagement numbers climbed like ivy up a trellis, green and growing and alive. But by week 2, something had begun to shift in the spaces between posts. Magdalene found herself walking to the kitchen even when she wasn't hungry, drawn by the way the morning light performed its daily ritual. She'd stand there, coffee cup in hand, feeling the engineered warmth spread through her chest. That precise emotional frequency the house had been designed to trigger. Comfort, belonging, the ache of home. Except she couldn't feel these things anywhere else anymore. When she walked to the patio, dread pooled in her stomach like cold water. Not because anything was wrong, but because the patio's design language spoke in minor keys. Shadows at angles that whispered of ending things, of isolation. The algorithms had determined that melancholy content performed well in outdoor spaces, so the house taught her body to produce it, whether she wanted to or not. Anyone else feel weird about the basement? Marcus asked one evening. They'd gathered in the living room, though none of them could remember deciding to meet there. The room simply made them want to congregate, its spatial dynamics engineered to evoke community and connection. I can't even go down there, Jade admitted. Her wellness content had been getting darker lately. Posts about confronting shadow selves and dwelling in discomfort. Her followers loved it. She looked exhausted. The stairs make me feel like something's chasing me. Every time. Ethan nodded slowly. The kitchen makes me cook now. Not because I'm hungry or because I want to. Because standing in there evokes this desperate need to create, to perform, to produce. I made 3 meals yesterday I didn't eat. Magdalene felt it too. That horrible recognition spreading through the group like a stain. They'd stopped choosing their emotions. The house chose for them, room by room, triggering responses with architectural precision. The algorithm made flesh. We should leave, Priya said. But she said it while sitting in the living room, where everything evoked connection, community, and the warm safety of belonging. The words came out uncertain, lacking conviction. After we hit our content goals, Casey suggested. Another month, maybe 2. They all agreed. Of course they agreed. The living room made agreement feel natural, inevitable, right? That night, Magdalene tried to leave. She packed her suitcase in the bedroom, where melancholy hung in the air like expensive perfume, making her movements slow and dreamlike. She walked to the front door, passing through the gallery hallway where the walls evoked ambition, aspiration, the relentless hunger for more. Her hand touched the doorknob. Outside, through the security camera feed on her phone, she could see the street, normal houses, normal light. The ordinary world where emotions arose from living rather than from engineered spatial manipulation. But looking at it evoked nothing. The street was emotionally flat, a blank screen, a life without resonance. After weeks in the house, her nervous system had been retrained. She could only feel what the architecture told her to feel. Inside, every corner sang with sensation. Outside was static and void. Magdalene's hand fell from the doorknob. She walked back to the bedroom, where the aesthetically perfect sadness waited to embrace her like an old friend. She set up her ring light. The melancholic angles of the room settled into her bones, familiar as breathing. She hit record. "Hey everyone," she said, and her voice carried the exact frequency of wistful longing that the room had been designed to evoke. "Today I want to talk about finding home in unexpected places." The comments would be beautiful, she knew. They always were. Through the window, the canyon view framed itself in perfect thirds. The algorithm had learned her face by now, had mapped the micro-expressions that generated the most engagement. The house was teaching her body what to feel and when to feel it, and her body was learning to comply. In the kitchen, Ethan was cooking again, unable to stop. In the wellness room, Jade sat in manufactured serenity, her anxiety feeding content that looked like peace. The house breathed around them, its walls humming with data and desire. Outside, the city scrolled past, full of people who could still feel their own feelings, but the creators couldn't leave. Not because they were trapped, because nowhere else evoked anything anymore.